Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Kernels of Truth by Progress Kentucky. We have a special episode, special focus this week. We are going to talk about the terrible tornado tragedies that hit Western Kentucky on Friday night and Saturday morning. We are going to look at the candle factory in Mayfield. We're going to talk a little bit about the role of climate in this disaster. We're going to talk a bit about the politics with President Biden just in our Commonwealth, and Rand Paul finally met a disaster response that he could support. Then we're going to welcome Barry Craig, a fellow good troublemaker who is also a Mayfield native and has been back to his hometown a few times to document what he's seen. We're going to hear his reflections on, and on what it feels like to see his hometown just devastated. Then we're going to close with our call to action and our events calendar with a special focus on how you can help the folks who have been impacted by these terrible tragedies. So first, though, are you ready to help turn Kentucky purple? We know that our Commonwealth has some work to do if we're going to beat back the red wave of bad politics and policy from the GOP supermajority in Frankfort. From efforts to stop teaching history that makes white parents uncomfortable to ending all abortion access in our Commonwealth, we need help to stand effectively against the GOP super duper majority. So if you want a Commonwealth that works for all of us, please do join Progress Kentucky. It is easy. Just follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you spend time on social media. Make sure to like, share, and comment on our content. Help us juice that algorithm to make sure more folks see and hear what we're doing. If you like what you're hearing on Kernels of Truth, just give us a thumbs up, leave us a review, or share out the show. And let's go ahead and check in with our co-host. And of course, we like to call ourselves a digital demonstration, not a talking heads news show on the interwebs. So if you're gonna come to a protest, you need to have a protest sign. I'm Aaron. I'm coming to you from Childsburg, which is a lovely deed-restricted community just on the outskirts of Lexington, right up against that growth boundary. And my sign would say, hashtag Team Kentucky, we're with you, WKY. And now our co-host for the evening, Doug Price. What's up with you?
Yes, Aaron. Glad to be here tonight. I'm from Harrison County. The county seat is Cynthiana. We have a thriving downtown district. Come see us. I don't really have a protest sign, but I didn't write it out. I don't write very well. Pretty sloppy. But anyway, my sign says, Kentucky comes together in a crisis. Back to you, Aaron.
That's nice. That's a wonderful, wonderful sentiment. So thanks for sharing that. And I think that's totally right. It absolutely, we are coming together in this crisis. So this has been just an absolutely horrible week for our Commonwealth. This terrible tornado cluster hitting the western side of the state Friday night, early Saturday morning, carving a 230 plus mile long, I think it places is 3/4 of a mile wide track through our state with historically devastating impacts. Currently, there's 75 confirmed deaths in Kentucky, with 122 people missing, a number that's been rising. 10 counties have reported fatalities, with Graves County, which includes Mayfield, the hardest hit with 21 reported deaths. 17 deaths in Hopkins County, 15 fatalities in Warren County, which includes Bowling Green. I think 14 of those fatalities were two families on one street. We've seen 11 folks dead in Muhlenberg, others in Caldwell, Marshall, Franklin, Fulton, Lyon, and Taylor counties. This is the most deadly tornado event since 76 folks died in Louisville in 1890. But despite the devastation and the loss of life, I think the Commonwealth has truly come together. And once more, I've been very relieved to have Andy Beshear as our governor. He mobilized the National Guard, the state troops, the appropriate cabinets, really just immediately. He's communicating clearly and consistently, providing important information for everyone, from those affected, those seeking to help. He launched a fund for people to contribute to in order to help those in need, which includes a $5,000 donation for funeral expenses of those we've lost to the storms. But it's not just Governor Beshear. People are stepping up and showing up. Chef Jose Andres and his World Central Kitchen has posted up in Mayfield. and they are, serving people food, of course, in a critically important, need in a time such as this. We, don't obviously we don't have, electricity. There's no, kind of services in these hard hit areas. So really important that folks do provide that service. But yeah, I don't know. I've just been really, really impressed by how people are stepping up, and of course, it's gonna be a long-term need. This need will not go away. We have got the world's attention right now, but that won't last. So I think it's really important we tell the stories that need to be told at this time. And I think one that's a developing story. We're going to find out more about it as it goes. But I think Doug's got a great kind of write up of the candle factory that's not smelling so sweet right now. Doug, can you tell us a little bit about what you found?
Sure. First, I want to mention, you told us that Hopkins County that had 17 deaths. My wife and I grew up in Hopkins County, and all her brothers and sisters still live in Hopkins County, and I have a sister who lives in Hopkins County. Fortunately, none of them had any problems, but the area where she grew up in Barnsley, that area was pretty much devastated. But back to Mayfield Consumer Products. There may be a developing controversy involving them. As you know, they're located in Mayfield and owned and operated by the Props family. Founded by Mary Props, the matriarch of the family, her sons, I believe, Troy and Travis, run the business in Mayfield. The company employs over 200 people and had ramped up operations to supply their candle products to P&G, Bath and Body Works, and others during the Christmas season. During this time, the plant had 2 shifts operating, basically 10 to 12 hours, 2 10 to 12 hour shifts, essentially running 24/7. When the tornado warnings started, plant supervisors instructed people to move to the designated safe areas in the plant. After the first set of warnings had expired, the workers went back to work. According to numerous reports, several of the workers requested to leave in order to be at home with loved ones, but some have said that they were either discouraged to leave or they could potentially lose their jobs. Part of their pay included bonuses above the normal salary if their shift was fully completed. So if someone left in the middle of a shift, then the potential pay could be cut. Other employees have stated that there was no mandate to stay and work and that some staff members did leave to be with loved ones. After additional warnings were issued, workers were instructed to go to the designated area again, when the tornado destroyed the plant, there were an estimated 110 people working, resulting in 8 fatalities. And as of this time, there are still 8 people that they haven't accounted for. And given the total destruction of the facility, it's a wonder that more people were not killed. In the early stages, Governor Beshear reported there might be as many as 100 fatalities just in that candle factory. It has been reported in the news that a friend of Tony Props, Bob Ferguson of the Washington, D.C. based Hawksbill Group, was hired as a spokesman for MCP. Also on December 14, 2021, at 5:10 in the morning, paperwork was filed with the Kentucky Secretary of State to set up a nonprofit 501c3 org named the Mayfield Consumer Products Emergency Employee Relief Fund. One would hope that MCP would donate a serious amount of funds into this account, along with requesting their business partners to contribute money too. In a statement on the company's website this weekend, Troy Props wrote, "Our Mayfield, Kentucky facility was destroyed December 10th by a tornado, and tragically employees were killed and injured. We are heartbroken about this, and our immediate efforts are to assist those affected by this terrible disaster. Our company is family owned, and our employees, some of who have worked with us for many years, are cherished. We've immediately established an emergency fund to assist our employees and their families. We are grateful to the first responders who assisted our employees following the storm, and we're thankful for those who are generously offering to assist us. Your prayers are needed and appreciated. And in a separate press release, as reported by Benziga.com, we are immediately retaining an independent expert team to review the actions of our management team and employees on the evening when a tornado struck our facility. We are confident that our team leaders acted entirely appropriately and were in fact heroic in their efforts to shelter our employees. We are hearing accounts from a few employees that our procedures were not followed. We're going to do a thorough review of what happened, and we're asking these experts to critique our emergency plans and to offer any suggestions on ways the plans may be improved, if any. In addition, today we're giving all employees $1,000 to assist them in covering short-term financial needs, and we will continue to provide additional support to our employees and our beloved community. I am committed to rebuilding in Mayfield, Graves County, and we are confident that over the long haul, we will be able to bring back 100% of our jobs. MCP may be a family-oriented business, but there have been some issues in the past. The company recruits from Puerto Rico. Bob Ferguson said MCP is constantly recruiting in a tight labor market, including in Puerto Rico. In 2019, a Bowling Green, Kentucky attorney, John Caudle, filed a lawsuit against MCP on behalf of Armando Rivera Hernandez, who was a worker from Puerto Rico, and he alleged that the company fired him for being overweight. Many of these people don't speak English. My client didn't speak English, Caudle said. These are people who come from economically challenged backgrounds that are willing to move to Kentucky from Puerto Rico for jobs paying $10 to $12 an hour. The lawsuit included a screenshot of a text message allegedly sent by MCP CFO David Birch, which says, "We're working diligently to clean up the epileptic, obese, pregnant, and special needs issues." The lawsuit alleged it referred to Puerto Rican recruits with physical limitations, medical conditions, disabilities, or a combination of conditions. The allegations were not aired out in court because a judge dismissed that lawsuit and a subsequent appeal. The factory's contract specified that any complaints Hernandez had about his employment in Mayfield would be routed to the Puerto Rico Secretary of Labor and Human Resources, not Kentucky government. The company also had contracts with at least 2 jails to bring in incarcerated people to work in the factory. Actually, one of the deceased was a corrections officer at the county jail. Were these workers receiving the same pay as others? Is this a good method of reacclimating offenders back into society? Over the next several months, we will find out if MCP truly cares about their employees or not. It sounds like they're doing some good things, but Kernels of Truth will be following this developing story. Back to you, Aaron.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly troubling. I think the track record of this company does not, to me, reflect a company that is, committed to its employees. I'm sorry, it's a bit of a red flag when they've got contracts with, the jail to bring in, inmates to work alongside their cherished, family-like employees. It's also a clear red flag that they're not willing to pay very well if they're bringing in inmates to work on these the candle line. I don't know. So we sent a tweet over to Bath and Body Works to just check and see what they think about that activity. So I hope that folks who are concerned about these allegations that are being made, maybe you want to go over there and you want to retweet it. I'll throw the link in the comments so you guys can take a look at it and maybe share it if you're on the Twitter machine. But I think Bath and Body Works should take a hard look at this for sure. The other thing that I felt good about, so the state agency is also going to be doing an investigation. So as much as It's great to hear the company is going to be investigating itself. I'd like to see an entity with a little teeth do that investigation, and something that has a little accountability and transparency. So Governor Bashir, I think, announced on Tuesday that the Division of Occupational Safety and Health Compliance is going to look at it, because they look at any facility that has fatalities that occur in a workplace. But clearly, this is remarkable, and the conflicting stories that are being told, I think, are give me worry, for sure. So I don't know. What do you think, Doug?
Yeah, it's you can hire an independent agency to come in, and that's good. But I agree, and I know that, as you said, Governor Bashir, they're also going to be investigating, and that's why I said over the next several months we'll find out, because the truth will come out, and hopefully all is good, and hopefully the plant rebuilds, but hopefully these employees who are displaced, potentially put in danger, hopefully that's addressed too.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right. So I've got another story that I wanted to cover. That is, I think, one that is maybe not front and center in people's mind, but I think it's one that's really important that we keep our eye on, because we need to just kind of learn what's happening in terms of these storms, and whether it's something we need to be worried about going forward, or things are going to be getting worse. Obviously, tornadoes are something that we know exists in Kentucky. I think December tornadoes are something that is fairly remarkable. And the research is, I think, becoming more and more clear that there are elements of, kind of what creates a tornado that can be linked very much to climate change. So, I look at a lot of these storms from my perspective. I'm somebody who spent a couple decades in New Orleans. We went through Hurricane Katrina down there, and hurricanes, I think, are very clearly linked to climate impacts. I really did, relaxed a little bit when we moved up to Kentucky, because we didn't have to worry about hurricanes. But now apparently that just like hurricanes have a season, and it's a season that they're now showing up kind of at the margins. These storms are showing up at the margins similarly with tornadoes. So anyway, you can't link a specific tornado to climate change, but researchers are learning more and more about what causes tornadoes and whether or not those conditions are linked to our warming climate. These kind of clusters of tornadoes, when 6 or more start within 6 hours of each other, are becoming more likely. The research is pretty clear on that. There's also research indicating that Tornado Alley might be moving kind of away from the plains and to the more populated southeast. So what that does is it increases the likelihood for actual impacts. If you're going from a kind of less populated area to a more populated area, that's clearly a problem. And then researchers have looked at the conditions that could lead to tornadoes: kind of warm, humid air, changing wind speed with height, which allows that kind of shear, which allows storm organization. And they have found that, at least for the future, there's definitely an increasing link to the season that produces the storms, which can create tornadoes. We're seeing more potential for these tornadoes. The storms that produce tornadoes in the fall and the winter and the early spring are increasing up to 25% per degree Celsius of warming relative to now. So kind of each degree it gets warmer, get 25% increase in the number of storms that are happening. In a new story that was just released, independent of what happened here in Kentucky, but researchers found big changes for winter storms: significantly longer, wider tracks, wind speed increases around 14% that added up to a 9-fold increase in power when using a formula that takes wind speed, rotation, and the size of the path into account. So, these winter storms are up 14%, power increased about 1.5 times for spring storms. And it just goes to show that this is something that we've got to watch. The research has to keep an eye on it. And it's I think, troubling for sure from my perspective as somebody who doesn't want to deal with more of these than we have to. Doug, what do you think? Oh, you, I think, muted yourself maybe.
Ah, Well, it's been a while since I've messed that up, so here I am.
Somebody's got to do it each and every show. So I'm
That's
glad it
true.
was you this week and maybe not me. We'll
Yeah,
see.
yeah. My face is, I think it's my sweater rather than my face is red. It's coming off. So anyway, I mentioned earlier that we grew up in Hopkins County. And I wanted to mention in November of 2005, they had a similar tornado outbreak in the same general area. And my hometown of Arlington was hit. And due to the fact that the tornado hit in the late morning, afternoon hours, there were no deaths. And I think the bad thing about this tornado is that it happened late at night. Everybody is at home. If people had been working at jobs other than maybe at the MCP, they might have been better protected. But when it happens at night, people are at home. Tornado hits. There's just nowhere to go.
Yeah. And a lot of people are just not got to catch the warnings, right? Because if you're asleep, hard to be warned about a tornado. So I think those nighttime tornadoes can absolutely be dangerous. They're dangerous whenever they occur. But you're right. I think having the kind of ability to see what's coming and get out of the way, or be in a place where there's a tornado shelter, like a bigger building, something like that. But it's not that tornadoes necessarily hit mobile home parks more frequently. It's just they are incredibly vulnerable to the impacts, right? So, but it seems like any building, and we'll get some images later from our upcoming guest, Barry Craig, very big, stout, strong, buildings were just devastated by this stuff. So this was an incredibly powerful storm. So, all right. So moving on, we do not have the news that you need in under 5 minutes because, as you probably noticed, we do not have Kimberly Cecil Jones with us. So when Kimberly reappears, so also will her segment. But we can put away our timers. But we have a couple of quick stories we want to touch on, and I think we'll actually probably touch on this with our guest. But the president was here in the state. He started his day at Fort Campbell at 10 a.m. with a briefing on this, the state of the state and what was happening. He then went on to Mayfield and Dawson Springs to kind of see the damage. I did want to just note that, as folks probably know, as much as we worked against it, this state did not vote for Joe Biden. This state absolutely was a red state and went with Trump by a scary margin. But it didn't seem to enter into Joe Biden's kind of calculus about what he needed to do for people in need in Kentucky. He wasn't trying to pick a fight with us because politically, we don't like him as much as as other states. So just a refreshing change from the previous administration, where it was all about him and it was all about politics. Biden got on this immediately with the disaster declaration. When the governor requested it, it was there. He's been incredibly responsive. Even our Republicans were complimentary and were working together to support the governor. So it was nice to see that kind of unity and an administration that didn't think about the politics but just thought about the people. So that was my take on Joe Biden's response so far. And I think Mayorkas, the folks who kind of head the agencies that are so important here, have been incredibly responsive, is what I'm hearing. And then I want to just contrast that with our friend Rand. So if folks have followed Rand Paul's storied career in the Senate, there's one thing that's remarkable about him, is that many things that are remarkable. Well, one thing in this situation, he never votes for disaster relief. He always makes some crazy, principled, horrible stance, like we can't vote for those greedy folks in New Jersey. They want the Sandy recovery money, but they're not willing to cut spending in other areas, right? That's not how disaster relief bills work, right? They don't necessarily need to pay for or a pay-go. You don't need to cut spending somewhere else to give the spending to these the states in need, because why would you do that? But Rand Paul votes almost every time against disaster relief spending because in his tortured mind, there hasn't been enough cuts elsewhere to offset that spending. So he thinks people in need to kind of, show up with their, slide rule or whatever, and point out areas of the federal budget that need to be cut, right? But it seems like on this one, he's right there saying that we need the relief and we need it right away. So I guess he's a gigantic hypocrite, is one thing that kind of, it appears to me, certainly, and I think other people have noted this as well. I don't know, Doug, what do you think about Rand and Biden and the politics of the moment?
So I think what I hear you saying is that when disaster relief funds hit Kentucky, Rand Paul is not going to stand at the podium and say, "Oh, I helped you all." Is that right? Because he, just like you said, he always votes against. He voted against recent bills that stimulated the economy, helped Kentucky, and that kind of thing. So he, I guess you could say, it'd be okay for him to come to Kentucky now and say what a great job he's doing, although we
I'm
know
sure.
that's not the truth.
Yeah, I'm sure he's gonna say that no, don't spend the money, people. Don't take this money because we didn't get the necessary offsets. I'm sure he's gonna be incredibly consistent. All right, so I'm gonna do one thing really quick, and then we are gonna get to our guest, Barry Craig, a professor emeritus of history. So always good to have a historical perspective. Most importantly, in this situation, he is a native of Mayfield, and what I want to do first, though, is just let you know how you can help. Right. So there's a couple of ways that you personally can donate and support, what's happening there on the ground. So the governor has launched the Team Western Kentucky Tornado Relief Fund. I think that is an important way to, to support what's going on, make a donation. It's tax deductible. But I think a lot of people will line up and say, hey, you should support us, like the Red Cross or other agencies. I'm sure will be there. United Way will be there. But one thing that I wanted to note is that our partners with the Commonwealth Alliance Donor Table, the Kentucky Civic Engagement Table, and Hood to the Holler have started a mutual aid fund to be directed to grassroots groups supporting the short-term and long-term mutual aid and relief for these communities that have been impacted by the recent tornadoes. They're going to be prioritizing groups that serve Kentuckians who may otherwise be neglected by other relief efforts, particularly Black, Indigenous, people of color, refugee, immigrant, and poor and working class Kentuckians. And I just want to encourage people to consider making a donation to this fund as well, because, as I mentioned, I was in New Orleans for Hurricane Katrina, and I can say with absolute certainty, kind of firsthand experience that I saw communities that the Red Cross or FEMA absolutely neglected. I was an advisor to a kind of similar grassroots focused fund, and it was really a critical component of a complete response to community needs. People absolutely slip through the cracks, and it's really important that groups on the ground have the resources to meet the needs that will inevitably be exposed during this disaster. And make the donation now. I think it's really important that the resources be around for the long term, because as quick as some of the response will be, we will also quickly be dropped from the news. And without some kind of attention to these ongoing needs, it's easy to forget that people are still hurting and that communities are still having a hard time coming back. And I think one thing that this didn't really hit big cities, kind of thankfully in terms of population impacts, but it hit communities that are kind of on the that are just kind of on the bubble, on the margins anyway, right? Because what we've seen, if you think about the census information, is that populations are moving from communities like these kind of smaller town, rural communities, to the larger metropolitan areas. Why are they moving? Is it because life's too boring there? Well, it's because there's not as many opportunities, because a lot of these communities are struggling, and it is really important that that those dynamics be kept in mind as communities try to recover. So we want to help support the folks on the ground, because they've absolutely got the the insights that'll be incredibly important. So what I want to do now is we're going to bring on Barry Craig, who, as I mentioned, a kind of a important individual in that he is a professor emeritus of history at Western Kentucky Community College in Paducah. He's an author of 7 books, co-author of 2 more, all in Kentucky history. I first ran into Barry as he was, as I said, a good troublemaker, working with the AFL-CIO to help engage in the kind of political communications universe, which we like to work in. And I found him to be just a stalwart kind of companion in our work, and so glad to invite him here. Unfortunately, for not the kind of happy reasons we'd want to be talking to him about smart, creative campaigns to hold politicians accountable, but instead, Barry is a native of that hard-hit community. So we just want to say welcome, Barry. Thank you so much for giving us your kind of time, and I'm sure you're very busy dealing with the kind of aftermath of this disaster. But thanks for joining us. And I just want to say, we just want to hear from you, kind of what you saw, what you experienced, and what it felt like going back, and tell people a little bit about your history with the community. I'm sorry.
I was born and reared in Mayfield on December the 7th, 1949. Grew up in Mayfield, went to grade school, high school, went to Murray State, got married in 1978. Then we moved to Mayfield in 1979. My wife and I did. She got a job at Mayfield High School where she taught for 36 years. We lived in Mayfield for our working career, most of our married life. A year ago, we moved to Arlington, Kentucky in Carlisle County, which is Melinda's hometown. We moved into her family home place, built by her great-great-grandfather, a country doctor in the 1880s. It's a marvelous old house. We still have very strong connections in Mayfield. Almost every Friday night, we're in War Memorial Stadium watching the Mayfield Cardinals play football. Melinda this semester taught a dual credit course with a community college in English. Still has a lot of friends on the faculty. And it's really hard to describe the horrible news we got around 9:30 last Friday night. In Arlington, there was almost no weather to speak of. Little rain, little lightning, a typical storm. And then we began to get reports from friends through text messages that Mayfield had been heavily, heavily damaged by a tornado. Now, Mayfield has had small tornadoes through the years, did some damage, but not a whole lot. But the reports we were getting, this was absolutely catastrophic. We decided not to go to Mayfield on Saturday, not to get in the way of the first responders, not to join the inevitable line of gawkers who come in these disasters. We stayed away. On Sunday morning, the First Presbyterian Church, which was destroyed, and the First Christian Church, which was destroyed, decided to have a joint service in the parking lot between the two churches. Melinda is the clerk of the session of the Presbyterian Church in Mayfield. We went over there while she attended the service, a communion service. I walked around the town, and I was absolutely stunned at the destruction in our town. As I said, First Presbyterian is a pile of red brick. The photograph you're just showing really captured exactly what it looked like on Sunday morning. The Christian church, which is a short ways away, is also virtually destroyed. The Methodist church is severely damaged. These are the downtown churches. The Baptist church has suffered some damage, not as much as the other churches, but you can see the power of this storm. Debris was everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Trees are ripped to shreds. This is East North Street. You can see the power of that storm that bent that street sign. Now, you try to bend a street sign with your bare hands. You can't do it. This is the force of this horrific storm. You're looking toward the north part of town, and that's where some of the heaviest damage was. These trees, they were remarkable to me. They reminded me of photographs I have seen of World War I battlefields on the Western Front. My wife and I have been to Verdun, been to the Somme, and these trees look like they've been denuded by artillery fire. The limbs are twisted off. The leaves are all gone. Of course, most were anyway, I suppose. But the trees are scarred and skinned, which looks like shrapnel. And in effect, it was shrapnel. Debris tore into those trees. Had a dear friend of ours, Paula Colley Buck. She and Royce, their house was damaged, heavily damaged. They'll have to move out because of that. A lot of our friends, I talked to 2 students of mine whose houses, well, one fellow's house, he moved into his parents' house. It was horribly damaged. Then another student was over at his mother's house. Mayfield, a lot of Mayfield have to be leveled. I mean, there's just simply no way around it. These buildings are severely damaged. I'm not a structural engineer at all, but you can tell by looking. We went back on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and to see the damage. And even today, the cleanup has progressed quite extensively. A lot of the photographs I took on Monday, you wouldn't see them now. Their first order of business was to clean the streets off as best they could. Power, I think, has been restored to parts of the city. There was an issue with water. The storm blew down a 500,000 gallon water tank, a water tower. I think some of the water has come back, but an awful lot of the city still has no power and still has no water. Tornadoes are weird in their path of destruction, as you mentioned earlier. If you're beyond the destruction zone, it looks like nothing happened. We came into Mayfield from the west on Kentucky Highway 80, crossed over the Purchase Parkway, and the first scenes we saw, absolutely no damage at all. It looked like nothing happened. We proceeded on up West Broadway. We reached a liquor store, which I believe is called the Lucky Liquor Store, which turned out to be not so lucky. It was heavily damaged. Proceeded forward at St. Joseph Catholic Church, suffered some fairly minor damage. We couldn't go any further. We stopped the car and began to walk, and that's when we got into the devastation zone. This thing, it hit the very downtown of Mayfield. The courthouse, vintage 1880s, lost the cupola and the clock in the upper floor, the circuit courtroom, and I believe the law library. But then again, the odd thing about tornadoes, the CVS drugstore was virtually unscathed, and I believe was open right away with generators. City Hall was damaged. The fire station downtown was damaged. And then you go north, that north part of town, it looks like a battle zone. I mean, houses are flattened or they're torn to pieces. It was just horrific. There have been 21 dead. And when I saw the first photographs of Mayfield on Saturday, I thought the death toll would be in the hundreds because a lot of these houses didn't have basements. And I think in a tornado, if you can get into a basement, you might have a chance. But again, I was not prepared for this. My wife was not prepared for this. We drove today down to our old neighborhood in the south part of Mayfield. Our house is absolutely untouched. But then you go 3 or 4 blocks over and you see the devastation. It was horrific, absolutely horrific.
And then you mentioned today. I know that today was kind of a big deal because the president was there. I understand you were there as well.
I was.
What did you see there?
He was very warmly welcomed by the citizens of Mayfield, and I do have some statistics for you. In 2016, Trump won 76.3% of the vote. And in 2020, he won 77.6% of the vote. I call this part of Kentucky Trumpistan. But again, people were very courteous. That's one thing about this I have noticed in our neck of the woods. I'm a red hot Democrat. Everybody knows that. I'm a union card carrying Democrat, decidedly left wing in politics, but that seems to have been forgotten. People, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, they're all pulling together in this, which is wonderful because let me tell you something. This tornado doesn't respect your politics. It doesn't respect anything. We're all in this together. And Mayfield is pulling together. They're relief crews in from all over everywhere. They're cooking. I know the Tide company brought in a bunch of washing machines. Um, the whole community is unified. Media came from all over the world. Literally, on Sunday, I had a conversation with a French woman who was a camera operator. My wife was a guy from Reuters, the British news agency. My wife, he took her picture. I think she got on the cutting room floor, but he talked. So it's now, of course, now the media is pulling out. Now, of course, with Biden, they stuck for that. But after Biden left, it's but the biggest issue I've been asked probably 10 times: will people build back? Will they leave? And my brother-in-law, we were talking at dinner the other night, and he said, "Okay, let's say you're 60 years old, you have a business, and you're offered an insurance settlement. Do you take the money and run, or do you build back?" And that is a really important question. Mayfield, as you mentioned earlier about small towns in decline, that's certainly Mayfield, population around 10,000. Before this tornado, as you've gone around our court square, we're a very typical small Kentucky town built around a court square. The north side of our court square, when I was a kid growing up, you had stores on all four sides. You could clothe yourself from socks and shoes all the way to a hat. The retail in this town is virtually gone. The north side of the court square is a bank. The east side of the court square is a CVS. The south side of the court square is a grass plot. No business, no buildings at all. The west side of the court square consisted of an abandoned Carhartt store. There are a couple of storefront churches, a gift shop, the Mayfield Messenger, and an abandoned law office. I dare say they will all be torn down. I can't imagine. I hope they're not. But in terms of safety, I think they probably will. Then you go on out to West Broadway, and you see they've already raised a number of buildings. We had one of the things I would invite your listeners, if they like good old fashioned West Kentucky barbecue, Mayfield was a mecca for that. Tremendous. People love barbecue down here. Carr's Barn, which had been open since the 1930s. It was it was actually on the landmark of historic places. It's gone. I walked by today, and all that's left is the concrete slab where it was. Our old post office, built in the probably early 20th century, it's gutted. I think they can build it back. But the old Presbyterian church, the church of my youth, and I'll admit I'm not much of a churchgoer anymore, but that church has tremendous sentimental attachments to me. I was baptized there. My brother was, my mother was, my two uncles were. My mother and dad got married there in 1947. We still have photographs of them walking down the front steps, and they both wanted their funerals in that church, and we did that. And we have we don't have photographs, but we carried their caskets down the same steps that they walked down when they were married. The church, like a lot of older churches, has memorial windows to various people. That church, by the way, had three congressmen. Lucian Anderson, who's one of my all-time heroes in history. Graves County was rebel to the core. Lucian Anderson was a Republican abolitionist. He voted for the 13th Amendment. Fascinating. Guys like that always fascinate me. And he literally risked his life. He was kidnapped by the Confederates. His life was threatened to burn his house down. Very courageous man. Always one of my heroes. The other congressmen were two brothers, Boris and Noble Gregory, in the 1930s. Noble was a New Deal congressman. A lot of history in that church. I'll tell you a very quick story. It was kind of amusing, I guess. When my wife and I were engaged, she said, "I'd like to go to your Presbyterian church." I said, "Okay." So we went, and what was interesting was when I was a kid, my brother and I, there was a window, a memorial window to a man named James W. Hocker, Hocker. My brother and I thought that was an odd name. Well, it turns out James W. Hocker was my wife's great uncle. So she returned to her Presbyterian roots in that church. One of the things they were able to say, thankfully, was the roll of honor, which listed all of the Presbyterian men who went off to World War II, including my two uncles. But the rest of the church it's just a pile of dusty rubble.
So
photograph of today.
Here's a shot from today. I see obviously there's the president. There's our lieutenant governor. Is that Comer behind him? Who is that?
I would say
I tried to crop him out, but I couldn't do that. Not very professional journalism. And the woman she's the head of the Episcopal. She's an AME, African Methodist Episcopal. She's the head of the bishops. But yeah, Comer, I did my best. But anyway, enough said.
Well, thank you for sharing this with us. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, sorry about that. I think I'm back now.
Okay.
Okay. I want to just again say thanks so much for sharing your images, your stories. What you noted, of course, is that the media is here today because President Biden was here. He will be moving on. He will not be here, in an ongoing capacity.
Well, you know what's interesting? I talked to a friend of mine who talked to a guy who works for Governor Beshear, and Biden said he would be back to a Mayfield City Commission meeting between 60 and 90 days.
Wow.
I think we need to hold him to that. But interesting, too, one of my former students who he's a history teacher and a football coach at the high school, he told me he had read that Biden, while he was born in Scranton, grew up in a town called Mayfield, Delaware.
How interesting.
And so he yelled at President Biden, I know you grew up in Mayfield, Delaware. This is Mayfield, Kentucky. Welcome to Mayfield, Kentucky. I didn't hear what the president said, but that must have really caught his attention. I mean,
I imagine.
That was
well, what I will say again, and all of this colored through my experiences with Hurricane Katrina and the rebuilding and recovery of that those communities that were hard hit. The disaster will bring the media, but as the media move on to the next story, it will be easy for people to forget the ongoing recovery. So Barry, I hope that you will, come back, let us know how things are proceeding, whether or not, President Biden made it to that city council meeting and where the city council is meeting, and, the challenges that those communities are going to face to recover.
Well, I really want to compliment. I really enjoyed the first part of the show, and I'm not just sucking up. I promise I don't do that. I'm an old reporter. But I really enjoyed just your analysis, your discussion of the whole thing. It really, really was good. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And
you can come back. Yeah, you absolutely can come back.
Well, I would love to do that. I'm looking to try to find the name of the bishop. She is the head of the Episcopal AME bishop. She's the AME church, as you know, came out of the Methodist Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and they have bishops like Methodists do. And she's the head of the bishop's board of the church. Wonderful. And that's in a photo cut line I sent to Bruce Maples. I'll plug Forward Kentucky.
We put a link into in the chat to one of your galleries. I know you've got more galleries that'll show up there. The photos are great. Very.
I do, and I really appreciate that.
No, we appreciate the work that Bruce does, and we're big fans of Forward Kentucky, and we think it's important that everyone take advantage of the great resources that are out there to tell these stories because they're really important, and we can't let the stuff get filtered through Fox News and talk radio, AM talk radio. So yeah. We are our bit. We're doing our bit to push back against that and provide some alternative viewpoints and alternative news analysis. And Barry, thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to move on to how people can help.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Again, we absolutely look to have you back. In the kind of months to come, as that recovery will not be quick.
Right.
And it will need ongoing attention and support. So thank you, Barry.
Exactly. Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thanks, Barry. Enjoyed it.
All right. So I think, Doug, you've got our kind of call to action and ways people can help. Is that right?
Yes. I do want to mention first, I tried to put this in the chat, but it wasn't in the right spot for me to be able to do that. But you mentioned Forward Kentucky. If you go to forwardky.com, they have a really good list of just about any activity that's going on where you can volunteer and that kind of thing. which leads me to the Kentucky Department of Parks. I retired from the Kentucky Department of Parks, and Aaron asked me to check with them to see what kind of volunteer opportunities they might have. I talked with Ron Vanover, a gentleman who's been there 31 years and who I know and respect. And he said they are looking for volunteers to help out at various parks that are housing people displaced by the recent tornadoes. Where they need help on the parks include housekeeping, laundry, and kitchen help. So if you're a retired chef or a food worker looking to help out, then parks will welcome you to their team of volunteers. They're currently housing displaced people at Pennyrile, which is in Dawson Springs, or outside of Ken Lake and Hardin and Kentucky Dam Village. Presently, Ken Lake and Pennyrile are full of displaced people, approximately 200 people. They're planning to open Lake Barkley, 60 rooms and cottages. They have an additional 60 rooms, but those rooms were damaged by a fire or smoke damage, and those won't be open for a while. They're housing a few people at John James Audubon, which is in Henderson, Barren River outside of Glasgow, and Rough River, which is located in the Falls of Rough. Unfortunately, housing cannot be provided for any volunteer because they're taking care of the people who don't have a home. So if you have a camper or like to tent camp in December and January, and you want to flip a pancake or whatever, then here are some email addresses of people that you can contact. Christy, CHRISTY .combs, COMBS at ky.gov, or Jennifer Spence, JENNIFER .Spence, SPENCE at ky.gov. You leave your name, address, contact info, what park you would like to volunteer, and what type of work you want to do. So that's my report on the Parks Department. They're there to help, and if you want to help displaced people, then contact them.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's so wonderful. The state, parks. I know that the parks have, really great facilities. So, the cabins and group camps and areas that people could stay as their homes are, they're figuring out where they're going to go next, if they can go back to their homes or if they're going to need a complete rebuild and to find a new place. So, people will be registering with FEMA. They'll have some ability to put people in hotels, but I think it's a really important kind of interim step to care for folks. And I'm glad to see the state parks step up this way. And so we put in the chat there those email addresses. We can also put in the chat like which parks exactly are housing people. We can throw that information in the show notes so people know where to look. All right, so I think that's mostly it. I'm going to do a quick run, kind of take us out. And again, thank you so much for tuning in on our special episode focusing on these just really terrible tornado tragedies that have hit our state and the western side of our state. So we're all here together for Western Kentucky. We'll be back next week. We'll have our full team. We'll have Kimberly Cecil Jones back with us. Progress Kentucky is a nonprofit organization registered with the Kentucky Secretary of State. We are organized as a 501c4. We're affiliated with the Indivisible Project and the Commonwealth Alliance Voter Engagement, or CAVE. Progress Kentucky's goal is to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. Some graphic content was provided by Couchfire Media. More information about Couchfire can be found at couchfiremedia.com. I'm pretty sure their website works. Production this evening was by me, which was why it was not that great. Turns out I am better hosting than I am hosting and producing. So hopefully next week we'll have Annabelle Nagel back helping us out. But our regular co-host, Kimberly Cecil Jones, the Jones Report is her weekly live talk and conversation show, news and talk and conversation show that occurs weekly They're retooling. They'll be back live soon. You'll find out that news here or on their Facebook at the Jones Report Radio. We want to say thank you to Nate for the theme songs. You can find out more information and music at natosongs.com. And if you miss our weekly live stream on Facebook, don't worry. You can rewatch the shows and see our sources over there on Facebook and YouTube. But if you think that Doug and I have faces for radio, go ahead and listen as audio podcasts. We're available on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. So speaking of NATO and that wonderful theme music, let's go ahead and play us out with a bit of that. But again, thanks Doug, thank you Barry Craig, thank you all viewers. Go ahead and give us a like, give us a share, and give us a chance to give you some progressive news you can use going into your next week. Thank you very much.